Are you struggling with your learning centers? Now, chances are there are 3 key ingredients that your learning centers are missing. And last week I shared one of the first key ingredients that your learning centers may be missing and thus causing you tremendous stress in this important tool in your learning environment. Today, I'm going to share the next key feature that your learning centers might be missing, and you are not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned. What's up, educational rock stars? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Farah, and here on my channel I strive to bring actionable tips and strategies for teachers and teacher creatives to take back into their classroom or their edupreneur business and make their lives a little easier. And along the way, I love sharing some entertainment along the way from my road travels as a full-time traveling edupreneur. Now, I've said this before, but learning centers are a critical tool that all teachers, regardless of grade levels, should be utilizing in their classroom. Learning centers give you so many opportunities to meet your students' educational needs. Now, in this video series, I'm going to be sharing with you 3 key ingredients that your learning centers need, and today we're going to talk about that second ingredient. But if you're interested in learning about the first ingredient, be sure and check the description box down below, where I will leave a link to last week's video where I talked about the first key ingredient that your learning centers needed to have in order for them to be successful in your classroom. Now, learning centers are a critical tool that you should be using, but they can also be one of the biggest stresses in our classroom. Most often when I visit classrooms, teachers, in fact, the number one request I get is, can you help me with my learning centers? Now, most of the time when I observe their math or literacy blocks, I can tell that at least one, but most often all of these key ingredients are missing. And if they're missing from your learning centers, then your centers are causing so much undue stress on both you and your students. Now, the next key ingredient that you need for your learning centers is functionality. If your system that you have in place does not allow your students to function without your immediate and continued guidance along the way, then your system lacks functionality. Now, I've shared before that in my early years as a teacher, I struggled to use learning centers and implement learning centers effectively in my classroom. I was and still am a huge proponent of flexible seating in the classroom. And while I love flexible seating in the classroom, one of the things that I realized was that flexible seating was causing me major stress and headache during my learning center rotations. While I love flexible seating, during learning centers, my students were taking forever to figure out what they wanted to sit on and where they wanted to sit. And then when cleanup time came, it often took up to 15 minutes to clean up centers and rotate because they thought they wanted to go rotate and change out their flexible seating. And it just was a hot mess. At transitions, my students didn't know where to go, didn't know which center they had already completed and where they needed to go next. And then during actual centers, my students were often interrupting me at my small group table for such menial things like they needed a Band-Aid. And we're not talking about major injury here. We know the kinds of things that our students interrupt us for. But to go to the bathroom, or they had a little bitty paper cut because we are dealing with paper, or any number of things that didn't really require my immediate attention, but they were interrupting me at my small group table and taking me away from the point of my learning centers, which was the ability to meet one-on-one or in small groups with my students who needed it the most. The problem was that I had a learning center system in place that required me to get up from my teacher table and help my students clean up and rotate to the next center. This was wasting precious time in my classroom. I was also continually interrupted at my small group table because my students needed supplies that they didn't have in the center, or they needed to sharpen a pencil, or they needed to go to the bathroom. My system wasn't functioning. In order to gain functionality in your learning center system, you need to make sure that your students know exactly where they should be sitting, where they should be working for that center. I understand if you are a flexible seating lover like me that you may want to give your students the opportunity to use flexible seating even during learning centers, but I don't believe that flexible seating should be utilized during learning centers until you have a system down pat and your students are ready to maybe move to that next phase. However, even then, I would limit it to maybe something that let them sit on the floor, and they would have to take that from rotation to rotation. There was no switching once they had decided what they were going to sit on or use for their flexible seating during that rotation. But the biggest thing is that they needed to know exactly where they should be sitting and exactly where the center was supposed to take place. And there should be a system in place that allows them to move from one center to the next without obstruction. So it should be an easy flow. I often like to do mine clockwise around the classroom, and with me being, for example, the equivalent of the 12 on the clock, and then we would rotate clockwise from there. But your students have got to know exactly where they're supposed to be working and exactly where they're supposed to be sitting. Your students also need to know exactly where they should go next during rotations. When it comes time to switch centers and move through the rotation, your students should not be wasting time trying to find a board and see where their next center is and what center they are going to next. Again, utilizing a system that allows maybe them to move clockwise means that they easily just move from center to center to center, and really all they need to know each day at the beginning of center rotations is where they start. So your students have got to know exactly where they're supposed to go next so that they're not wandering around the classroom trying to figure out where they're supposed to be and wasting precious time. Now, like I said, I was being interrupted, and you may be being interrupted as well. And in order for your system to be functioning correctly, you need to have a system in place that'll make sure that your students have access to all the materials that they need in their centers. My favorite way to do this is just to make sure that all the supplies they're going to need are in the center itself. I know that a lot of teachers have utilized individual supplies for students, and maybe they're carrying around a supply bag from center to center. But I have found the most success by just providing everything they're going to need, whether it be pencils, scissors, glue, whatever they're going to need to complete that center activity. I just make sure it's all right there in the center for them. This eliminates them having to come ask me for supplies. Now, if it is a situation where there are supplies in the center, but they still are going to occasionally need to sharpen a pencil, it might come up. But I also had a system in place where they knew they could just go sharpen their pencil. I will leave a link down below to my favorite kid-friendly pencil sharpener. It is the most phenomenal pencil sharpener, and my kids, even my kindergartners, were able to use it, and it gave them a perfectly sharpened pencil. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, the next biggest reason that I was interrupted during my learning centers was because my students needed to go to the bathroom. So you need to have something in place so that your students can actually figure out how to go to the bathroom on their own. Now, I know this might seem scary, especially for those younger students, but you can even teach your kindergartners a system that allows them to get to the bathroom when they need to and do it in a timely manner. My favorite way to do this was with a stuffed animal that we often was used as our bathroom pass, and they simply moved the stuffed animal into their center wherever they were, and they left it in their center so that everybody in their center would know that that person had gone to the bathroom, as well as I could at a glance know that somebody had gone to the bathroom. I share a lot more about these different tips and the things that I actually used over in my program Learning Centers Made Easy. I will leave a link down in the description below so you can go check that out as well. Now, limiting interruptions at your small group table is crucial for you to get the most amount of time with your students in your small groups. And one of my favorite ways to limit the interruptions that I have at my small group table is to utilize a crown on my head. Now, in the early days, I actually wore one of those little plastic crowns that you can get from dress-up sets or from the toy store. Eventually, I did kind of, up my game a little bit, and I actually went and bought an actual inexpensive tiara that I would wear in class. And I would often remind my students that when I was sitting at my table, I was the queen of the classroom, and you couldn't just walk up and talk to the queen. That's not how that worked. And of course, they've seen plenty of Disney movies to know how those type of things work. and they really did respect that. And it was a visual for them to see that I was not available and they needed to figure out or use the systems I had in place to figure out their problem. And again, I had a system for pretty much everything that might become an interruption at my small group table. Now, again, learning centers are a great tool for your tool belt, and I do believe all teachers, regardless of grade level, should be using them. But if your centers don't have that functionality piece, they are not going to run successfully, and you are going to be banging your head against a wall and stressed out, and your students are going to be stressed out as well, and there's not going to be a whole lot of learning going on during learning centers. Now, functionality is the second ingredient that you're going to need to make sure your learning centers have. I shared the first last week. If you are interested, jump over and check out that video so that you have that first key ingredient as well. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, in this video series, I told you there were 3 key ingredients, and I'm going to be sharing the third one next week. But while you wait for that video, I again want to invite you to jump over to Learning Centers Made Easy. Check out this program that I have developed from my experience. It is the exact system that I used in my own classroom to actually make sure that I had all 3 of these key ingredients in my learning centers and run successful learning centers in my classroom. And it made my teacher life so much easier, took back my sanity. So I will leave a link down below in the description where you can jump over, check it out, and join the wait list for the next time we open enrollment. If you're looking for more tips and strategies for your classroom or teacher creative business, make sure you check out some of those videos on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit that notification bell so that you get notified when we go live or upload a new video to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. You keep being an educational rock star.